Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually, when we open up a stack of documents for this show, we're looking for something immediately applicable to the daily grind.
Right. Productivity, supply chains.
Exactly. We look at history, maybe some longevity research,
Yeah.
but today
Yes.
is completely different.
It is, yeah. It's certainly a departure from our usual curriculum.
Today, we are looking at a manual on how to become a god. And I want to be really clear right off the bat. I don't mean that metaphorically. I don't mean be a god at the gym or a god of productivity. I mean literally transitioning from a biological human being into a celestial being.
It is a wild ride. We're digging into the writings of Lifechanyuan and the philosophy of Lifechanyuan, and the promise here isn't just, self-improvement.
I know.
It's a complete existential overhaul, a detailed roadmap for escaping the cycle of reincarnation entirely.
And the scope of this material is just massive. We've got lectures, we've got revelations, debates. What strikes me is how it mixes things that, well, they usually stay far, far apart. You've got quantum physics on one page and then like strict instructions on how to share a bathroom on the next.
It's an unusual cocktail for sure. You have this total rejection of the traditional family unit sitting right next to theories about subatomic particles. But the central question, the real mission of this deep dive, is actually pretty simple.
Okay.
The text poses a question to you, the listener. Are you rice and wheat, or are you weeds and grass?
That is a brutal distinction to start with. Most self-help says, everyone is special. This says, nope, some of you are weeds.
Well, the internal logic is that an awakened being is useful. It's nourishing. It's destined for a higher state. That's the rice or wheat.
And the weeds.
An ignorant mortal is like a weed, disordered, creating a mess, and ultimately, destined to rot in the field. So the question is, if you suspect you might be a weed right now, how do you cultivate yourself into something else?
And that's what we're going to figure out. We're going to unpack the 8 great awakenings, the physics of this so-called angel particle, and the incredibly radical lifestyle changes, like walking away from your own family, that this philosophy demands.
And we're going to do this by exploring the internal logic of the text. Because I gotta say, if you accept the premises Shofeng lays out, the conclusions are, well, they're mind-bendingly consistent.
All right, so let's start at the foundation. This isn't just presented as faith or mysticism. The text leans heavily on a scientific explanation for divinity. It all comes down to frequency.
Vibration, that's the core theory. The only real difference between, say, a rock, a human, and a god is the speed at which their internal energy vibrates.
Okay, so everything is energy.
Right. Shufeng argues everything is an aggregate of structure and energy. The form you take just depends entirely on that frequency.
The source material uses this dragonfly analogy that I actually found it really helpful for visualizing this.
It's a great visual. So imagine a dragonfly resting on a leaf. You can see its wings clearly. They have a definite shape, a color, a rigid structure.
Low frequency.
Exactly. In this philosophy, that represents a low frequency. It's material. It's stuck in one place. Heavy.
But when the dragonfly takes off,
the wings flap so fast they vanish. You can't see them anymore. They become indefinite. But they're still there. They're just operating at a frequency your eye can't process.
And that's a celestial being.
That's the idea. They exist, but their vibration is so high, they're invisible to our low-frequency eyes.
So the whole hierarchy of life is just a frequency chart. Trees are at the bottom, very slow, very solid.
Then animals, then humans.
And if you can crank your frequency up past the human limit, you essentially vibrate out of this dimension and become a celestial.
That's the mechanism of ascension, yeah. The higher the frequency, the less material you are and the more freedom you have. And to prove this isn't just, magic, the text points to a very specific scientific discovery from 2017.
The angel particle.
The angel particle.
I looked this up to double check. This is the work of the physicist Zhang Shusheng at Stanford, right? The Majorana fermion.
That's the one. So in standard physics, you have matter and antimatter. They're opposites. If they touch, they annihilate each other. Boom, energy release.
Right.
But the angel particle is a unique state where a particle is its own antiparticle.
The text describes it as a state where 1 equals -1.
Which mathematically sounds impossible, but in this quantum state, it represents perfect self-harmony. And Shifeng seizes on this. He says this particle proves the existence of the Elysium world.
How? How can a person be a particle?
It's about self-sufficiency. Humans are usually defined by lack. We need food, we need love, validation. We're always looking for our other half.
Okay.
A super celestial is self-harmonious. They contain both yin and yang within themselves. They don't need a partner. They don't need external validation. They are a complete, stable energy loop that doesn't annihilate itself.
So the goal is to become a human angel particle. If we pull that off, where do we go? The text maps out this whole cosmology that sounds like a video game.
It is incredibly structured. We are currently in the mortal world. If you succeed, you don't just go to a generic heaven. You graduate to the 1,000-year world.
Which sounds nice, but I'm guessing that's not the top floor.
No, it's a stopover. It's described as a place with no worries about food or shelter, basically a paradise of leisure. But if you keep going, you hit the 10,000-year world.
And the final destination?
The Celestial Islands continent, or the Elysium world.
And it gets specific 20 parallel worlds, 36-dimensional spaces. This isn't some vague spiritual mist. It's like a coordinate system.
And that specificity is key to the appeal. It tells you exactly where you are and exactly where you're trying to go. But knowing the destination is the easy part. The how is where it gets incredibly difficult.
Difficult feels like an understatement. The text introduces these 8 great awakenings. I assume this would be stuff like, be kind or meditate more.
Not quite.
It's much more about breaking your brain's normal way of processing reality.
It's all about shifting perception. You can't enter a high-frequency world with a low-frequency mindset. Take the awakening to life and death. This isn't just don't be afraid.
Yeah.
It requires a total recontextualization of what a body even is.
The disembarking analogy, that really drove it home for me.
Right. Zhu Feng argues you have to see your body as just a vehicle, a boat carrying you across a river. When the boat hits the shore, you get off. That's death.
So if you're crying and screaming because you have to leave the boat?
You're confused. You think you are the boat. The source argues that if you fear death, you haven't awakened. You are still identifying with the vehicle, not the passenger.
Okay, that's a huge one. But the one that felt surprisingly harsh to me was the awakening to predestined relationships. It basically says you need to curate your social circle with extreme prejudice.
It goes right back to the physics of vibration. If you hang around weeds, people who are cynical, greedy, angry, their gravity pulls your frequency down.
The law of resonance.
Exactly. The text warns that connecting with ghosts, which is how it refers to low vibration people, it traps you. You have to cut those cords, even if they're old friendships.
And that ties into the awakening to the 8 diagram arrays. This was a fascinating concept. It frames things like money and power not as rewards, but as arrays.
Think of an array here like a labyrinth or a trap in a video game. The text argues these social structures are designed to entrap your consciousness.
So once you step into the money array,
you get stuck playing the money game. You forget all about ascending because you're too busy counting coins or managing investments.
So a celestial doesn't avoid money. They just realize it's a side quest.
They see it as a game mechanism. They might play it if they have to, but they never, ever mistake the game for reality. They don't get attached to the outcome.
This leads to this really counterintuitive dynamic between the heart, the brain, and nature. We're always told, trust your gut or use your head. This philosophy says, do neither.
This is the paradox at the center of the whole practice. The source argues that the heart is a desire machine. It creates wants based on what's outside you. I see a flashy car, I feel envy, I want it. That's a trap.
And the brain?
The brain is just a hard drive for social rules and memories. I should do this because society says so, or I remember getting hurt, so I won't do that. Also a trap.
So if you turn off your heart and your brain, aren't you just a vegetable? What's left to guide you?
Nature. The text compares it to being an infant. An infant acts on nature. It cries when it's hungry, sleeps when it's tired. It doesn't calculate. It doesn't worry about the stock market.
It's just presence.
Right. The argument is that calculation creates drag. It lowers your vibration. To float into the celestial worlds, you have to stop trying to steer the ship and just flow with the current of nature.
Stop steering. That sounds peaceful in theory, but when you apply this to the real world, things get radical, fast. We have to talk about the second home concept.
Yes.
Because this is where the philosophy attacks the fundamental unit of our society, the family.
This is the watershed moment for most people reading these texts. Zhu Feng is adamant. You cannot become a celestial being while living in a traditional family structure.
He calls the traditional family capitalist and the root of all selfishness. And he uses that hilarious, bizarre image. He says trying to be a celestial in a marriage is like Edison sitting on an egg hoping to hatch a chicken.
The environment is biologically wrong for the result you want. The argument is that family forces you to be selfish. You care about your kids, your spouse, your bank account.
You build wall.
You build walls to keep others out. You accumulate resources for your specific genetic line.
Which makes sense from an evolutionary perspective, but Zufeng says that's the polar opposite of divinity.
Correct. To be a celestial, your love has to be universal. You can't have mine and yours. If you love your child more than you love a stranger's child, you're still operating on animal instinct, not celestial vibration.
So if you can't have a family and you can't have private property, what do? You can't just wander the street.
You join the collective life. The text describes these communities, what they call the second home of hundreds of people living together, sharing everything. No private money, no private bedrooms.
And no private bathrooms. The toilet test. I honestly thought this was a joke when I first saw the notes.
But it's a crucial litmus test in the documents. It's brilliant in its own way. It's easy to feel spiritual when you're meditating alone in a quiet room with scented candles.
Sure, anyone can be a saint in isolation.
But can you share a toilet with 100 people and not get annoyed? Can you see someone else eating the last piece of fruit and feel genuine joy for them?
It's the ultimate stress test for the ego.
It creates constant friction. And that friction is the point. If you get angry about the dirty toilet or the noisy roommate, you're still a weed. You're clinging to the self. The collective life is designed to sandblast your ego away until only nature is left.
Speaking of sandblasting the ego, the text also has a very strict mental hygiene protocol. It treats negative emotions not just as bad moods, but as literal poisons.
Toxins is the word used. Jealousy is described as a quality of the devil. The text claims it destroys your immune system and lowers your frequency instantly. But the most interesting one to me is the stance on complaining.
Yeah, we usually think venting is healthy. Get it off your chest, writer.
Zhuofeng disagrees entirely. He calls a complaint a poisonous arrow. When you complain about someone, you aren't just releasing steam, you're actively attacking their soul. You are maltreating reality.
By focusing on the negative, you vibrate with the negative.
Precisely.
So you can't complain, you can't be jealous. You have to abide your mind nowhere.
Yeah.
I struggled with that phrase a bit. It sounds very zen, but what does it actually look like to abide nowhere?
It's radical detachment. It means you don't stick to anything. The text gives a checklist. If you have enemies, you aren't a celestial. If you have debts, you aren't a celestial. But here's the kicker.
Right.
If you have goals, you are not a celestial.
No goals. That goes against everything we're taught about success.
A goal implies you're lacking something in the present. It implies you need the future to complete you. A celestial is complete right now. If you are striving, you aren't arriving.
There was that debate in the notes that really highlighted this. The discussion between Zhuofeng and Dizen Celestial about bad people.
Oh, that's a classic New Age debate. The popular idea is that everyone is your teacher. Even the guy who robs you, he's there to teach you about forgiveness. You should be grateful.
And Zhuofeng says, absolutely not.
He shuts it down completely. He asks, if a scammer steals your life savings, did he fulfill you? No, he ruined your life. He lowered your vibration. He made you miserable.
So you shouldn't hug the cactus to learn about pain.
You should stay away from the cactus. Zhuofeng argues that ugly things corrupt you.
It's so practical. It's almost like mental quarantine. Protect your frequency. Don't let the weeds drag you down under the guise of learning lessons.
Because if you let your frequency drop, you miss the destination. And then we need to talk about that destination again, because the description of the Elysium world is, well, it's remarkably explicit.
It really is. The text tries to explain what nirvana or emptiness feels like. And it doesn't use words like peace or clouds. It basically says, imagine the best orgasm you've ever had, but it lasts forever.
It's the self-loss analogy. Think about that specific moment of climax. In that split second, you forget your name, you forget your mortgage, your ego is gone. You are totally, 100% immersed in the sensation of the present.
Yeah, no past, no future, only now.
And the text argues that this isn't just physical pleasure. It's a glimpse of the celestial state. Zhuofeng argues the Elysium world is a permanent state of that peak experience.
Which connects back to the angel particle.
Right. Super celestial beings don't need a partner to achieve that state because they're self-contained. They're running that energy loop internally constantly.
Wow. It's a compelling vision. A state of permanent, self-sufficient ecstasy. But the price of admission is high. You have to give up your family, your private bathroom, your brain, your desires.
It's the ultimate trade-off. Give up the human experience to get the God experience. You strip away everything that makes you a specific person, your history, preferences, relationships, to become pure energy.
So if someone listening is thinking, okay, I'm not ready to move into a commune, but I want to raise my vibration, what does the text say a celestial actually looks like in daily life? It's not flying around shooting lasers.
No, and that is the final twist. You might expect a God to be grand and imposing, demanding worship.
Right.
But the text says the path to the extraordinary is to be completely ordinary.
Chopping wood, carrying bricks.
A true celestial is humble. They do the dirty work, they wash the dishes, they don't distinguish between noble work like writing poetry and low work like scrubbing floors.
You want to be special?
That's ego. That's low vibration. That's a weed trying to grow taller than the other weeds.
It reminds me of that Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
It's very similar, but there is one final test mentioned in the source material, a question you have to ask yourself to know if you've actually succeeded.
The watershed question.
The question is, if you were told you would die tomorrow, could you live unrestrainedly today?
Meaning, would you panic? Would you rush to write a will? Regret things you didn't do?
If you feel panic, anxiety, a need to fix things, you are human. You are still tethered to the dock. You're afraid to get off the boat.
But if you could hear, you die tomorrow, and feel nothing but joy and freedom.
Then you're a celestial. You're ready to fly. That's the standard. Total liberation from the timeline of life and death.
I think if most of us are honest, we'd panic. Which I guess just means we have a lot more weeding to do in our own gardens.
It definitely makes you look at your bad days differently. It stops being, why is this happening to me? And starts being, how is my frequency reacting to this?
A manual for gods, disguised as a guide to life. Thanks for walking us through this one. It was a trip.
My pleasure.
And to the listener, check your vibration before you tune in next time. This has been The Deep Dive. Catch you on the next one.